Hello, I'm Mike Wheeler, and today we're going to go through week one of our safety leadership course. And this is going to be an introduction to workplace health and safety. So, how this program is going to work, how this course is going to work, is that we're going to cover a ton of safety information. I'm going to try to gear most of it pretty much towards welding because that's the trade you're here to learn. But we can't leave out all the other trades because as a welder, you're probably going to be working with at least a few of them throughout your career. And they've learned a lot of lessons in safety in other trades that we can apply to keep ourselves safe and to keep our coworkers safe and all that kind of thing. So anyway, so in this PowerPoint, there might be some videos to play. I probably, if they're short, I'll play them. If they're not, I won't. But this PowerPoint without the voiceover will be available in the course, so you can review it at your leisure. So anyway, let's get started. So, objectives. At the end of this lesson, you should be able to define an accident and a hazard. You should name and define the four main types of hazards. Name and define different types of accidents. Explain the differences between unsafe acts and unsafe conditions. List the 3 ways toxic substances can enter the body. Explain how companies must plan for emergencies, and then explain the purpose of an accident investigation. So, So who's responsible for safety? The canned answer is everybody is, and that's actually the truth. It's always going to be a team event. In that team, there are different responsibilities. The employer, the person who is paying you to be on site and do the job, is responsible for providing a safe work environment. That means tools and machinery are inspected and maintained. All the machine guarding is in place and it's functional. All the chemicals you might work with are all within OSHA limits. They're going to establish safety rules to tell you what you can and can't do, what you need to wear, what you can't wear, where you can go, where you can't go, and then they need to train you on those safety rules, procedures, and protocols. This can be very regimented, or it can be very informal. And in my industry, in my career, I've seen both. I've been in places where as soon as they hired somebody, they would sit them down for an 8-hour overhead crane training lesson with a test at the end. And I've been in places where they say, "Hey, you know how to run the crane? Nope. Go work with Bob. Help him lift some stuff. He'll show you how to run the crane." So it can be, like I said, it can be formal or it can be very informal. So on the employee side, you as the employee are responsible for following the rules your employer sets forth. You need to wear the PPE that you're supposed to be wearing. You need to follow the rules. You need to not go where you're not supposed to go. You're supposed to not do what you're not supposed to do. All that kind of thing. You need to inform management if there is an issue. If you find something broken, you need to let them know. If the forklift's leaving a puddle of hydraulic fluid every time it's parked, you need to tell somebody. You also probably ought to take the initiative to put some floor dry down on it, or a cone or something so that people aren't slipping and sliding through it. You got to properly maintain and use the PPE you've got. Welding hoods aren't, you buy the thing and you wear it forever without ever cleaning it or maintaining it. Same thing with safety glasses, all that kind of thing. As your gloves get worn out, you need to get new gloves, because once you got holes in your gloves, they don't protect you. And you also need to arrive at work in the proper physical condition to do the job. There's so many workplace injuries I've seen that are directly related to how people are taking care of themselves. It's not the job necessarily. The job on the job caused the injury, but the stage was set with how they treat their bodies. One of the things I've always seen is, when it would get really, really hot in a welding shop, the guys who, over the weekend drank 48 beers and showed up to work Monday, a lot of times they would just fall over at about 11 o'clock of heat exhaustion. They're totally dehydrated, in terrible physical condition, should not have been at work that day. So you've got to take care of yourself so you can be safe and you can do the job safely. So accidents and hazards. So what's the difference? Well, an accident is an unexpected event resulting in illness, injury, or property damage. An example would be having a grinder bind in a cut and having it kick back into your arm, causing an injury. A hazard is a condition with the potential to cause illness, injury, or property damage. So an example would be that grinder that kicked back into your arm. It kicked back into your arm because it bound in a cut, but me taking the guard off of it is what allowed it to dig into my arm. And that's a true story. That happened to me when I was young, running grinders without guards because they got in my way. That's exactly what happened. I was, grinding out a weld and got in pretty deep, and it caught and kicked back and went right into my forearm. So the accident was my injury. The hazard was something I had created by taking the guard off my grinder and not being in the right position to have it not go right into my arm. I wasn't out of harm's way. So as you can see from the above example, hazards and accidents are often closely tied together. An unsafe act can create an unsafe condition, which in turn causes an accident. And most workplace injuries are the result of unsafe acts. And probably in my whole career, I don't know if I can count one injury that wasn't caused by a person making a poor decision. And it happens all the time, but almost always we are the cause of an injury because we're humans. We make mistakes. We have poor judgment some days. We take risks we shouldn't take. So what we're trying to do is give you the tools mentally to know the hazards you're facing, the risks you're taking, all that kind of thing, so you can be as safe as possible on the job. So watch this short video. Hopefully the sound comes through.
The safety pyramid compares the frequency of different types of incidents, ranging from unsafe behaviors and potentially hazardous conditions to incidents that result in serious injuries or fatalities. The less severe incidents occur more frequently. For every 10,000 unsafe behaviors or hazards observed, there is likely to be one serious injury or fatality. While serious incidents almost always result in a thorough investigation, minor incidents and observed unsafe behaviors are frequently not looked into, and in many cases go completely undocumented. However, those near misses and unsafe behaviors are indicators of underlying problems that will eventually lead to a serious incident if not corrected. Always investigate and document near misses and unsafe behaviors. Addressing the problems they reveal is key to preventing serious incidents.
So the whole purpose of that is, I think about that safety period a lot. It was explained to me by one of my former supervisors. And, when you work in a shop where everybody's always, getting minor cuts and scrapes and bruises and all that kind of thing, for every couple thousand of those, you'll have the next level up. And then for every 100 of those, you'll have the next level up. And what it really boils down to is we need our workplaces to be in a condition and with people in it to work in a fashion that all of those little cuts and scrapes and bruises, they get way cut down by wearing the right PPE, thinking about what you do, taking care of hazardous situations at work, sharp corners on tables, round them off. It's all those little things that if you're taking care of the little stuff, it never gets the opportunity to build up to something major. You can walk into a shop and just look around and pretty much know like how serious they take safety. And they might not hurt people very often, but if they don't, it's just because the people working there are hyper vigilant to not get seriously injured. Ideally, we work in places where safety is priority number one, and it should be. But out there in the real world, you're gonna have to keep your head on a swivel because depending on where you go to work and the people that work there and the kind of the theory of management on safety, they might just not want. They might just be doing the bare minimum to stay out of trouble. And those are shops that generally have problems. So anyway. All right, so let's talk about types of hazards. So the four main ones we're going to deal with are electrical hazards, chemical hazards, mechanical hazards, and environmental hazards. So Electrical hazards, pretty much for us, it's going to be electrical cords is going to be the big one. Sometimes machinery. The welders we're dealing with, they're all, possess a lot of electricity in them. Chemical hazards, so that'll be stuff that's flammable, stuff that's toxic, stuff that's explosive or corrosive. Mechanical hazards, getting caught in machinery, handling stuff, and then environmental hazards, which we actually run into as a welder a lot. We deal with. It's funny thing about being a welder is, in the summer everything you touch is hot. In the winter everything you touch is so cold your hands freeze to it. So we're dealing with that a lot. Depending on where you're at, you'll deal with high humidity, lots of noise and vibration, and sometimes exposure to radiation. So the fatal force, so per OSHA, over half of all construction fatalities were the result of one of the following. That's falls, struck by an object, electrocution, or caught in or caught between. So just looking at this, falls are by far the biggest fatality hazard on a job site. And that's, a lot of places are trying to get rid of ladders just because it's a lot harder to fall off scaffolding or to fall off some kind of work platform. So that's something you'll probably see a little more of once you get out there. Recognizing hazards. So hazard identification is something that is it's absolutely key, not just to work, but being safe away from work too. And it's something you have to train yourself to do. You need to be observant. You need to be paying attention. When I say keep your head on a swivel, that's what I mean. Is we need to observe. We need to assess the area of trip hazards. Where's the fire extinguishers at in case we need them? How do we get out of the building if the place catches on fire? Are they running an overhead crane through the shop if they've got something heavy? We need to look around and see all that stuff and identify it. We need to inspect our tools. We need to do our cords, our equipment, all that kind of stuff. We need to find these hazards before they end up causing injuries. We need to watch and listen. Pay attention to what's going on around you. Where are people in relation to you or in relation to stuff you're moving? Forklifts and cranes. Are they delivering material in your bay? Should you not set up to work someplace where there's going to be a forklift show up? And listen to what your machines are doing. When you run a machine day after day after day, you'll be the first person to know when it's making a weird noise. So listen for that and investigate it when that happens. And then communicate. Inform the people around you what you're doing. If I'm lifting something with a crane, I want everybody in the area to know what I'm lifting and where I'm going with it beforehand. The other thing, communication, is if you see somebody doing something, I hate to say stupid, but foolish, stop them and ask them. And you don't have to be a jackass about it, but ask them questions that will reveal their thought process. Because a lot of times people do foolish things because they don't think. They didn't think, 2 more steps forward. If I do this, and this is going to happen, then this is going to hurt me. If you can broach that subject with them and ask them what their thought process is, a lot of times you can get them to come to the safe conclusion for themselves. You don't have to be the bad guy. And then also, inform your supervisor of any unsafe conditions you can't fix. They need to know that stuff. And that, in a lot of, if you break something, tell somebody. That's like one of my absolute cardinal sins in the shop is if you break or damage something and just walk away from it, man, there's something wrong with you. Tell somebody. That broken piece of equipment gets somebody hurt. Your boss probably isn't going to be happy, but you'll have done the right thing. So to me, that's a big deal. Health hazards. So we're going to talk a lot more about this throughout the year, but some unsafe conditions are not as obvious. Some stuff will hurt you immediately. Some stuff takes a long time for the effects to become evident. And those are, toxic substances. We don't deal with a ton of chemicals in the welding industry, but you'll be around them to some extent. The gases we use usually aren't necessarily toxic, but they do have health hazards. Heavy metals, you'll get a lot of heavy metals in the welding industry. Carbon monoxide, sometimes even asbestos, depending on what you're working on. So for toxic substance, 90% of the exposure comes through inhalation, and that's why personal protective equipment is so important. You can go down to Norco and buy a respirator. If that respirator isn't fit to your face, or you didn't shave that day, it's not going to protect you the way it should. After inhalation, it's going to be ingestion and absorption are the other two main methods. The ingestion thing is the big thing is people not washing their hands. They'll work with a chemical and then they'll go eat their lunch or smoke a cigarette and they'll end up ingesting that chemical. Absorption, a lot of in welding we don't have a ton of it, but in in the painting world, a lot of the solvents they use are like straight absorbable through the skin, and repeated exposure can cause serious health issues. So noise, and it's a pun, but it's like noise is the silent cause of damage. It's amazing how many people who've been in the welding industry for any length of time have hearing damage, myself included. And we'll talk. I think there might even be a whole chapter dedicated to hearing hazards, but it's something that is like nobody thinks about now because it's not going to hurt us for 30 years. Well, in 30 years, you're going to wish you paid attention to it now. Radiation, you hopefully or someday are going to get to see them radiographic test welds. You'll be around that stuff. You need to know at least some of the hazards and dangers involved in it. Controlling hazards. So if we can't eliminate them, or substitute it for a hazard for substitute a safer option for a hazard, there are three methods of workplace controls, and that's engineering. And these are in rank of effectiveness: engineering, administrative controls, and then the last line of defense is personal protective equipment. So an engineering control would be, we were using this paint that was dangerous. We switched paints, so we completely removed the hazard from the area. We were using this welding wire. It puts out too much manganese fumes, so we switched welding wire. Or we redid our whole shop and put in fume extraction to get all of the harmful fumes out of the shop. That's an engineering control. Administrative controls, these are less effective, and the administrative controls are, I'm going to make a rule so that guy stays safe. Well, the problem with that is they're only safe while they're following the rules. They still have the ability to do the wrong thing and get exposed. The other administrative control is managing hours. OSHA goes by what's called a time-weighted index or time-weighted average, where with noise you can be around a very loud noise for a very short amount of time. The lower volumes you can be around for a longer time. So, somebody had some super loud piece of equipment. Even with hearing protection, it's damaging the hearing through bone conduction. Maybe you make an administrative rule you can only run that 1 hour a day, and that would put you in the OSHA exposure okay range. But that's an administrative control. The last one, and the least effective, is personal protective equipment, or PPE. In some cases, when you've done everything else, you've got to rely on, PPE is just how you're going to manage this. Why it's the least effective is again, it involves humans. It involves humans wearing it, period, wearing it correctly, and then maintaining it so that it's continues to be effective. And inspecting it so that when they realize that, hey, the seal on these goggles is bad, they actually go get a different pair of goggles. Humans are really bad at this. And the problem with PPE is you can be really good at it 90% of the time. 10% of the time, you're bad at it. That's when you can get hurt. Types of accidents, big list. You can read it. These are all OSHA categories, so some of them seem like very similar, but when they're filling out the reports, these are what they're going to put in. Accident investigation. So to me, it tells me a lot about a work site with how serious they take their accident investigations. And if they're not doing investigations for minor injuries, that's a big red flag to me. And when I say investigations, like, we don't need to sit down and have a trial, but somebody should find out what happened and why. And then, from that, find the root cause and then take action to fix it. And it might just be, hey, I got to give this guy more training because I told him to do the right thing and he did the wrong thing. I got to talk to this guy. The second time that happens, the solution might be that guy doesn't work here anymore. I can't trust him to be safe. He's gone. But every incident should have an investigation conducted, and the good places are investigating close calls and near misses. They're investigating the stuff that people didn't get hurt. Those are the places that are proactive enough about safety that they're never going to have that big fatality incident because they're just taking care of the little stuff so well. These investigations can be formal or informal, but everything should be looked at. And also, good investigation of anything requires an honest assessment of facts, not assumptions. And you've got to continue to look deeper until you find the root cause. A lot of times, it's really easy to say, "Oh yeah, I know what it was. It was this guy just did the wrong thing." Well, let's investigate that. Let's find out because it might be the case, it might not. So dealing with emergencies, you should every time you walk into a building, you should know where the emergency exits are. You should be looking around for fire extinguishers. I do this when I go into restaurants. If the place catches fire, how do I get out? Where are the fire extinguishers? Is there an AED on the wall? In a shop, where's the eye wash station? Where's the first aid kit? That's stuff you should be asking your supervisor while they're walking you around on your tour for your first day of work. Some places have designated first responders on site. You should know who they are. Is there a more than a first aid kit, a trauma bag or an emergency responder bag? Where is it? In this day and age where everybody's got cell phones, this is less of a big deal, but if you're calling 911 from a hard line, you have to dial like 8 to get out first. That's something you need to know. And also, is there an established evacuation protocol? If the place catches on fire, where do you meet? You all meet in the parking lot. These are all things that your supervisor should tell you. If you're walking a job site and you start asking these questions and they look at you like you got a third eye, that should tell you a lot about this place's safety culture. But this is all stuff you should know just for your own safety, your own gratification. So wrap up. Key ideas. The workplace, talked about it. Workplace safety is a shared responsibility. If you manage to control the close calls and near misses, injury accidents will be very rare. You need to be doing hazard assessment constantly. PPE is the least reliable and least effective way to prevent injuries or accidents. Not all hazards are easy to see. Some of them will show up later in life. Investigate not only injury accidents but close calls and near misses. Talk about that a little bit. And always look for the true root cause of an incident. They talk about ask 4 whys and a how. If you ask why 4 times, then you'll come to like a root cause, and then the how is how are we going to fix it. So here are the references I used for this. And if you have any questions, send me an email. Talk to you later.